Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise, Business and the Transformation Economy, sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. I'm Ron Baker, along with my good friend and Threshold colleague, Ed Kless. On today's show, folks, we're talking about the experience dividend, why money is time. Hey, Ed, how's it going?
Hey, great, Ron. This is a little bit confusing to some of our audience. They're like, what? What are you guys talking about?
I know.
Billable hours?
Let's go back to the start, as we always do.
Yes.
And talk about Ben Franklin's witticism, time is money, right?
Right. Yep.
And that was from a letter that he wrote, I believe it was to his nephew. The nephew was asking Franklin's advice on his business. And Franklin pointed out that, listen, if you spend the day at the beach instead of in your business, he said, you're gonna lose money. He says, because time is money. What he was actually illustrating was opportunity cost.
Sure.
Right? The day at the beach is going to cost you what you could have made if you stayed in your business and worked in it. So that's been taken to believe that, time is money. But George Gilder turned that around and said, well, no, that's not true. Time is not money, but money is time. And this is something that superabundance authors, Gail Pooley and the other one who
Marion Tupy,
thank you, talked about in Superabundance, and it's also talked about in George Gilder's book, Life After Capitalism. I even believe it's in Knowledge and Power. But the idea that, we buy things with money, but we pay for them in the time it takes us to earn that money.
Right.
And we got wrapped around the axle with this, Ed, because we're saying, gee, well, does this mean the labor theory of value is correct? No, because it's measuring prices, specifically time prices. It's taking the price of all the commodities, goods and services produced in an economy, including experiences that we're going to talk about today, and it's denominating them in time, but it's starting with prices, not value. So it has nothing to do with value. It's simply a time price calculation, because time, as you taught me, is a constraint, right? But it's constant. We each get 24 hours in the day, so it's a constant constraint, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's why it's a constraint, not a resource. Because if a resource you can add more of, I can get more time. Then this is as an individual, by the way, right? So I can get more the resource of time, but you can't. As an individual, you cannot possibly do that. I guess as a firm, you can say you can, but that's not even the issue. But I'd like to even express it this way, Ron, because I think this is the one of the more important points. Time is not cost.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing, because when people say, well, the time is money, and they're equating that with their cost, this is costing me X to do. And then they're saying, but no, that's not your cost, because we know what the costs are, regardless of whether or not you're allocating this hour to this customer or this hour to this customer, doesn't matter. Your costs are fixed. So it's irrelevant to the conversation. And certainly it's irrelevant to the price, as we have talked about for 3 decades now, because price is primarily based on cost. It's primarily based on perceived value, not cost, and prices justify your cost. So I think all of that has to be said, because that's where people get, as you said, wrapped around the axle, and even we get lost into it, is thinking that time is somehow a component of cost, and it cannot be, because it is a constraint, not a resource.
Right, and that's a great point. And just let me add one thing to it. When you point that out to accountants, they'll say, "Oh, but I mean opportunity cost." Of course, we have to measure our opportunity cost, and that's an economic concept, not a cost accounting concept. That's the first point that needs to be made. But the second point that needs to be made is that opportunity cost can only be analyzed, assessed, computed before you take action.
Right.
Not after. If I could have been at the beach today, I had to make that decision before I jumped online to do the show.
Right.
Right. If I analyze it after the fact, I'm crying over spilt milk. It's a sunk cost at that point.
Correct.
So
Correct.
that's a really important point. But the reason I titled this The Experience Dividend is because I do want to talk about an article that we're going to reference that talks about how to measure the value, or I'm sorry, how to denominate a time price for an experience, which is a very interesting thing if you think about it. How do I measure the value of going to Disney World for a day or going to a Taylor Swift concert, right? And there's a framework to do that. But before we get there, Ed, I just ran across, and this was cited in one of Joe Pine's newsletters that he puts out, and it was actually an article written by two gentlemen, two economists actually, and they actually have a book on this topic as well. And it's the two guys are W. Michael Cox and Richard Alm, and they wrote this report for the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas in 1997. So this is way before Superabundance book came out, and it's called Time Well Spent: The Declining Real Cost of Living in America. And the reason I love this is because it's got some great examples in here that I really liked, even though we've done a lot on time prices. We've interviewed both Gail Pooley and Marion Tupy. I think Gail we interviewed him twice on this topic. But they start out by quoting Joseph Schumpeter. And he says, Queen Elizabeth owned silk stockings. The capitalist achievement does not typically consist in providing more silk stockings for queens, but in bringing them within the reach of factory girls in return for steadily decreasing amounts of effort. So even he knew it was about time prices, even though he didn't use that term. And then get this, American essayist Henry David Thoreau noted in his famous book, Walden, the cost of a thing is the amount of life which is required to be exchanged for it, immediately or in the long run.
Right.
So even he knew it. Mark Twain knew about it. Mark Twain.
The Connecticut Mankey in King Arthur's Court. There's a story from that.
Yep. Now, Adam Smith, I think, knew about it too, but he actually confused it with the labor theory of value, which I won't get into, but I just thought that was really interesting. But here's some interesting things, and I just point this out for my dad, and this blew my mind. It's an example of a service increasing in time price. So this blew my mind. A woman's haircut in 1920 cost a quarter.
This is the price.
This is the price.
The price was a quarter.
Price was a quarter. Now, at the average wage per hour, and I think it was probably unskilled. Maybe it was blue collar. I'm not sure. They didn't say. They weren't as precise as Pooley is in Superabundance. But whatever it was, whatever they used, it was 27 minutes. So you had to do 27 minutes worth of work to get a woman's haircut in 1920. In 1950, it was $1.50, but it cost 63 minutes of work. Now, that's interesting to me.
Sure.
It might show you that women's haircuts were more perceived as higher value, and hence they were willing to pay more. This is post-Depression, right? This is post-World War II, so there's a lot of factors going on here. But then in 1997, when this report was written, typical woman's haircut was $10. This blew my mind because my dad was charging a lot more than that in the, even in the 70s. But $10, which was 46 minutes. So it decreased from 1950 from, 63 minutes to 46, but it was still higher than 1920 at 27 minutes. I just found that fascinating. I don't know if this is a great example of Baumol's disease, right? That we have to pay barbers and hairstylists more because wages in other sectors are rising. So to keep them behind the chair, they have to be paid more, and that's part of the Baumol disease with services. But either way, I just thought that was interesting. I think you'll find this interesting. In 1970, an IBM mainframe capable of 12.5 million calculations a second, sold for almost 4.7 billion or $4.7 million. Today, meaning 1997, it's less than $1,000 for a personal computer capable of operating 13 times faster. So the work time for the $1,000 computer was down to 27 minutes. That's kind of fascinating. And then another example that I really liked was they point out in here that a 3-minute phone call, you have to be kind of old to remember this. A 3-minute phone call from New York to San Francisco cost $20.70 when it was first available in 1915. At an average hourly wage of 23 cents, that's more than 90 hours to afford a call. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing, yeah.
And then these guys point out, far from being a blight on society, unequal income distribution is instrumental in driving society forward. It's a natural resource. I love that line. What a great line. Income inequality is a natural resource. Think about that.
I know it's absolutely fascinating. Of course, these guys are with the Federal Reserve. I'm sure they were fired immediately from those this report. This is heresy.
They're academics. I think they're academics. So they probably came in as consultants or something. But yeah,
right.
What a great line. And they said the true test of an economic system is how productive it is with people's time. The majority of us aren't born with big bank accounts, but we are born with time. Time is the real currency of life. What we can acquire for its exchange is our most important asset. The result is a democracy of consumption, not by the grace of government, but by the mechanism of markets.
Amen.
It says it beautifully. Yeah, and they point out too, just in a little footnote to a graph they have, this a century ago, nobody, not even society's wealthiest, could travel by air, wear comfortable tennis shoes, or even take an aspirin. Yet modern day Americans regularly do all of these things, and our ancestors would gawk at the products we take for granted. We talk
and this
about
is
this
19.
a lot.
This is 1999.
In 97, yeah.
97, sorry. So yeah.
So I just thought that report was really interesting. We have a link to it in the show notes. You don't have to read the whole thing, but kind of flip through it. Take a look at some examples. You might be interested in some of the examples. I mean, there's a lot of them, but it was really kind of the precursor to what superabundance did. But superabundance applied this to many more data sets,
right?
Commodities from around the world. So, but still, great thinking, and I really appreciated that report. And unfortunately, Ed, we're up against it already. And folks, I'd like to remind you, if you want to contact me or Ed, you can send us an email to asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. Do go out to our Patreon channel where you can subscribe and get shout outs at certain levels and get access to our bonus content. You can do that at patreon.com/TSOE. And now a word from our sponsors. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about the experience dividend, why money is time. Time is not money, but money is time. As Gilder says, it's tokenized time, which is interesting. But Ed, there's a second article that I really wanted to dive in with you because I just found this fascinating. And it's from a blog post from White Hutchinson, which is the name of the outfit, I believe. I don't know who wrote it, but it was from May of 2025. Again, this is something that Joe Pine cited in his newsletter because he cited in this blog post. So they're talking about location-based entertainment and sports venues. And he says they are in the business of selling time well spent. And he says what people buy is the time they spend engaged at the venue. Now, you just went to COSM a week or two ago, right? What did you think of that? That's definitely a location-based experience or entertainment, right?
Yeah. No, I thought it was fantastic. I think it's I would absolutely go back again. The venue is really cool. I mean, part of it is just sports bar with a lot of big screens, but the one section which is built sort of like a stadium, you actually sit and it's a curved screen that curves around you, and they go to various locations in a particular sporting event and show you from that particular location. So the night that I went happened to be a game against the Houston Astros against the Texas Rangers. And first the game starts out and you're sitting behind home plate. And then the next inning you're out in right field. And then the next inning you're down the third base line. And you can just look around as if you're looking at the stadium and you get a very similar view. It's not three-dimensional. It's obviously two-dimensional, but you're right there and you're feeling it. Now, the other interesting thing that they do is they do play the broadcast. So, which is a different experience because usually when you're at a live event, you're not hearing the broadcast, right? So it's a combination of those things, but it was interesting to see. And I would absolutely go back again for the right venue, the right thing. And I also think that this is something that's probably not too far away from home entertainment, where we're going to start to see people build curved LED screens inside their media rooms, and that will just replace really large TV sets. The other possibility is maybe this is where Apple's Vision Pro goggles go. If that same capability, but that's with something sitting on your face. This is year round. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting, just because it was an experience, is that they do. The food was quite good. I mean, a lot of these places, I think they can skimp on the food because they got you there for the experience of being there. But it was quite good. It was, I would not say moderately priced, but it wasn't off the charts expensive, and it was good. So they're doing a good job. There's a couple of these locations. I think one in Dallas, one in Los Angeles. It's a mini Sphere, if you will. They also show movies there as well, which I would be interested in going back and seeing how that plays out as well. So
you went there to watch a specific game.
Correct. And you buy tickets for the specific game.
What happens when the game's over? Do they switch to another game if one's going on, or does the place close up? I mean, what happens? Yeah,
they don't switch to another game. It's you're especially where you're in the area where it's the stadium seating, right? So they may put other things on the screen, but that event is then over. So you're expected to clear out of wherever you're sitting there. There's no reason to stay there. Now there's another whole part of the venue that is like a more of a sports bar kind of vibe to it, where it's just a wall with lots of different other screens in it, and then you can sit down and eat there as well. So it's the combination of the sports bar vibe and then the stadium seating with the curved screen. That's interesting. And you can buy tickets for both, right? So you have to buy a ticket to go into the place, period, end of story. So in a way, it's a Costco type model, or a cover charge, if you want to think about it that way. So you got to pay even just to get in, even if you're not sitting in the stadium seating area. If you're sitting in the bar area, you still got to pay to get in.
Gotcha. I remember Joe Pine used to rail against remember the, what was it, Hard Rock Cafe, because they didn't charge an entry fee, but they charged you $30 for a crappy hamburger.
Right.
And he thought that that was backwards, that the food should be moderately priced, but you should pay to get in because that's the experience.
Yep. And I would agree with that. No.
Yeah. So they talk about, okay, how do you measure this? And they give an example of a blockbuster film at a cinema, usually lasts, say, about 2 hours and costs about $16. Now that's 13.3 cents a minute. That's how you can see what people are willing to pay for the value of spending time watching a movie, right? They might walk out hating the movie, which, but basically that's how it's calculated.
Well, and again, this is the, let's talk about this precisely. This is the price. You are paying 13.3 cents a minute for the price. The value is, at least should be in your mind, above and beyond that, because otherwise you would do something else with that money. You would spend your money doing something else. So, but just to maintain our precision here, because I think we can get caught up in cost, value, and price pretty quickly here.
Yep. No, that's true. Because if you hated the movie, then obviously the value was a lot less than you expected.
Right.
To you. Right. Now, if you go to an IMAX screen, that costs $24 or 20 cents a minute. So we jump up from 13 cents for a regular movie to 20 cents for IMAX. If you buy a one-day ticket to the Magic Kingdom, at least as of 2025, that's about $180. And if you spend, 10 hours in the park, which is typical, that's 30 cents per minute, which is interesting. So it's greater than the IMAX screen of 20 cents a minute. If you go to an NFL game, that's 69 cents per minute because it costs about $132. The Super Bowl, 2024 Super Bowl, was $18.29 a minute. And then they looked at music concerts. The average price of the top 100 worldwide concerts was $136 or 75.5 cents a minute. Taylor Swift's $14.36 a minute.
You skipped over one, Ron, and that is that when the Super Bowl had the $18.29 per minute for face value tickets sold. What I thought was even more interesting is that it was actually $34.96 per minute for the average resale ticket, or what we used to call scalping. But
and they didn't give that. They didn't give that for Taylor Swift, did they? But
no, they did not.
Hers, I wonder how many of her tickets are scalped.
Right, a lot. Yep.
Yeah. And then this is what's interesting about this, Ed, and I think this is the big idea kind of buried in this that Pine reveals. Like, take the Magic Kingdom. They're raising their money value of time faster than inflation. And Joe Pine calls this the valueflation concept. Valueflation. That is really cool because they point out from 2000 to 2024, the price to go to the Magic Kingdom increased 224%, but inflation was only 81% during that time period. And so this was a significant price increase, and attendance grew from 15.4 million in 2000 to 18 million in 2024 to the Magic Kingdom. So people were valuing it more. And this is Joe Pine's point about how inflation sometimes is mismeasuring or maybe missignaling what's going on. It's not that it's becoming more expensive adjusted for inflation. It's that people are valuing it more. And this is part of the answer. I don't know how big this part is, but this is part of the answer for healthcare and even education. We love to bemoan that, well, it's expensive because it's subsidized, right? Especially education. Let's just focus on that because we have all these student loans, blah, blah, blah. But there's also something else going on. There's more demand for college education and people are willing to pay higher prices for it. And that's valueflation that Joe Pine's talking about.
Yes, but I would say this. A lot of the studies that talk about this, especially the collegiate level, say that education, the price is increasing and therefore you would say that it's also valued. But the price increase is incredibly consistent with the amount of aid available.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So in other words, if the aid were not available, would the prices have increased as much because of that? And I think the answer is it's not monocausal, right? But I think I think a fairly good chunk of it is based on, hey, listen, well, because there's more subsidies available. And then, look, we can talk a little bit what to do with this. In fact, I think it comes up in the article or another article that Joe Pine wrote last week, is that what colleges really should be doing is backing their tuition from their endowments, not from government subsidies.
Absolutely. All I'm saying, and John Tamny makes this point, and again, I don't know how big this effect is, but I think it's there for sure, is even if you were to strip out all of, the subsidies and student loans and had the colleges fund it through the endowment, I still believe tuition would be rising.
I would agree with that.
Demand, because we see the same thing in healthcare.
Right. And both of those are also due to the fact that we are just overall wealthier. As a world, right? So we can afford to spend more on it. And this is, the point I think you like to make is well, we spend a lot on orange juice too. We spend what is
the right amount, right?
What is the right amount? What's the right amount of orange juice?
If people are going to spend their money, I'd like to see, no problem them spending it on healthcare, healthier, wealthier, wiser, right? I mean, that's part of the goal. But I really do think the value inflation thing is pretty interesting. Then they point out that in the same time period, 2000 to 2024, Universal Studios also experienced valueflation by increasing 224%, much like the Magic Kingdom did. But Six Flags price only increased by 54% in that same time period, far less than the 81% rate of inflation. So, and park attendance was flat at Six Flags. That's really interesting. So that tells you something, that people don't value roller coasters as much as I do.
No, it also is that Six Flags is an amusement park, not a theme park.
That's right. That's
a big difference.
Yep. So I just think this is all really, really interesting, but it is an interesting way to think about the time well spent and how it looks from the customer's perspective and what they're willing to pay for. And I think about this in terms of professional firms, not time by the hour. That's not what we're trying to say. I mean, certainly the Magic Kingdom isn't pricing by the hour. We're just doing this calculation by the hour because it's an interesting measuring stick, right? Because it's constant. So anyway, Ed, we're up against it again. And folks, I'd like to remind you, if you want to contact me or Ed, send us an email to asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. Do check out our Patreon channel, and you can also rate us. You can go out to ratethispodcast/TSOE. And now a word from our sponsors.
And we are back on the Soul of Enterprise talking about the experience dividend, why money is time, which confuses people. I know, Ron. I mean, you got to be committed to this show,
or warped,
or warped. You got to be, which is why we really appreciate our audience, because there are so many things that we know we have like shorthand for. Like every time Ron will say, "Well, as Jonah says," part of my heart's thinking of like someone new listener's going to be, who the hell's Jonah?
Who's Jonah?
and why do I care? And that would be Jonah Goldberg, by the way, for those of you who don't, who's someone that Ron and I both follow. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We are talking today to talk about this experience dividend, why money is time. And Ron, from this piece as well, which again was from whitehutchinson.com, I believe in answer to your question that this article was written by Randy White. At least that's the way it appears on the website, the way I read it, but I could be wrong. It's not explicit. There isn't a byline, but he's the one who seems to be doing the newsletter piece of this. So that would be my guess. Anyway, he has some other examples of the constant annual valueflation from 2000 to 2024. And he also talks about concerts, which I think is interesting. Admission price increased by 232% while also growing at 36%. Prices for the top 10 U.S. music concerts increased by 97%, attendance growing by 78%. And for average prices for admission to all sporting events rose 120%. So now, when they say all sporting events, I'm assuming that is professional leagues across the board. Would be my guess, right?
And probably domestic, right? I mean, it might not include soccer or cricket or
right. And then and the National Football League saw a 230% increase in prices with a 13% annual attendance increase, which is interesting because I think from 2000 to 2024. I don't know whether the NFL added any teams. I'm pretty sure that the 32 teams that are around right now
were there.
Were there in 2000. That may not be the case. I'd have to go and look that up. But that would have to be taken into account with regard to the attendance. Is all I'm saying. Right.
I thought the Titans.
I want to say that. I'm sure.
I'm sure Greg's already.
Well,
found
yeah,
it.
he'll have that for us at the break and let us know. And you're wrong. Okay. And then the next part of the report talks about this civic science poll that was done, which I think is really interesting. And the question was asked: do you value your time or your money? And the responses were 5. Right? Time by a lot, time by a little, both equally. Money by a lot or money by a little and money by a lot. And overwhelmingly, people said time by a lot, 30%, and time by a little, 12%. Equally was 46%. So only 13% valued money at all a little over time. I thought that was a really interesting finding, that only 13% of those polled valued money over time. That is an example, my friend, of that society really growing wealthier.
Absolutely.
For that to be the case.
And I bet, Ed, that 13% who value money over time trend younger. I would have loved to seen this broken out by age as well, because 4 and 10, 42% said they value time over money. Mm-hmm. And to the financial pros out there, who's our audience?
Right.
It's that top 42% at least, right? Mm-hmm. And, that's who we serve. And like you said, 46% value it equally, time and money, and only 13% value money over time. I bet that 13% are younger people, probably just starting their career, where, money, you're chasing the dollar for sure when you start out.
Yeah. Now, they did break it down by socioeconomic status, and this was fascinating to me because I don't know, my brain had this counterintuitive, but maybe it's not. And what this study found is that the hours of leisure that are in a typical day by education decrease with increased education. Let me say that again. Hours of leisure, including time on sports, by the way, of a typical day, the hours of leisure decrease with an increase in education. So high school graduates had an average of 6.15 hours of leisure per day, whereas someone with a bachelor's degree had 4.5 hours of leisure. Now, if I said to you, okay, so what this means is that the average person with a bachelor's degree has less time to spend at leisure than someone who only graduated high school, you'd say, nah, that can't be. The high school graduate has got to be working far more than the college graduate. It's got to be working because they have to earn more money. And that turns out not to be the case at all.
Yeah, no, I know it is counterintuitive, but when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. The
It does.
With the bachelor or higher degree probably does work more time. We know this just through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They actually have this pretty well documented that wealthier people work more hours.
Mm-hmm. And probably commute more, right?
That could be part of it. And they probably spend less time, doing leisure things like watching YouTube and cat videos. And they probably spend more time reading, investing in their human capital, right? Online courses, executive education, whatever it might be. So that one didn't surprise me that much. But what I did like, and this guy reiterates a point that Joe Pine loves to make, that all of these statistics point out that people definitely want to avoid wasting their time.
Yes.
That's what Joe Pine calls negative value, right? You're actually contributing negative value to human flourishing. But because of that, if you can avoid wasting time, that means making time well spent becomes even more valuable. The way I think about this, Ed, see if this makes sense. Sure, we'll shop at Walmart to buy the essentials of every day, right? We're going to take those savings and we're going to plow it into experiences. Maybe travel to exotic places or go to Disney World or whatever it might be. But that makes those things more valuable.
Right. Or said another way, we can afford to spend more on them, and then we do. Right. We can afford it, and we do.
And we know this and not even just those, how you see the surveys, Gen Z, Gen Y, whatever, millennial, they value experiences more than stuff, right? We've been hearing that for a long time. But I think that's just human nature. I mean, so much of this is just human nature.
I think it's because we all automatically have more stuff. Of course, we're in a far wealthier world than we were. The stuff is becoming less and less important because we have all the stuff. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about this last week. Our grandfathers would not be able to recognize our day when they were boys. Even when our grandfathers went to work, did either of your grandfathers do anything remotely close to what you do?
Ed, I'm not even sure 1970 Ed and Ron would recognize our days today.
Right.
I'm sitting here on Zoom talking to you. It's just weird. I can't even put myself back into 1970 to try and even grapple with that. But It is weird, let alone my grandfather looking at what we're doing. Yeah, it is amazing. But
you guys talk to hear yourselves talk, and people pay you for that?
What? But the wealthier people are, the more they value time over money. That's the one message I wanted our audience to take from this. And this is why we're seeing concierge doctors, DPC docs, all the other services that you buy to save time, right? But when it comes to the professionals, it also has to be time well spent.
Right. And that's time well spent with the professional, right? Yes. This is not the professional, quote, spending time on the file, doing the tax return back at the office. That is not what we're talking about at all. This is what your aspirants, want from you is to be able to come and get FaceTime with you. That's what they want. They want to spend their time with you. They don't care what your time is spending on their stuff. That's still the case.
Yep. It's not about our time. It's about their time. And are they willing to spend it with us? And do they walk away thinking that was time well spent, like they walk away from Disney World thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And, this is why when we talk about the transformation economy, I think sometimes we tend to skip over the idea of experiences, but the experience of spending time with our customers is still a critical component of the transformation economy because it's this time well spent. Now, time well invested is the transformation, is the guiding the transformation. And it's also, as you've said this many times, time well invested is not just our time with them guiding the transformation, but them doing things on their own to get to that final destination point in the transformation. Like the example of Joe Pine trying to become a scratch golfer. He was out there practicing even when the pro wasn't around.
Right. So
Right.
that's he's investing his time
His
in
own
stuff
time.
that he learned from the professional. Yes.
Right. And that's a really important point. The other thing that excites me about this, Ed, and I was just on one of Hector's webinars for Reframe. I know you were too. I didn't know you were going to be on that, by the way. That was cool. And this is something that AI can't do.
Exactly.
This is something that AI can't do. Now, AI can do a lot of the work, or maybe even come up with the journey, the milestones, maybe some of the steps. But when it comes to that human interaction, I think this is why Paul Dunn, the co-author with me of Time's Up, his 10-80-10 rule. And look, I'm not going to get hung up on the percentages. It could be 20, 60, 20 for all I care. But the point is that 10% of your time is discovering these aspirations, right? 80% of the time can be AI doing all the stuff to lay out the journey and all of that to get to the transformation destination. But the final 10% is the celebration of getting there, sustaining it through time. This is stuff AI can't do.
Right. And let me just back a second because I know Paul would want this to happen. Because he says this in the first two sentences of the article that this is not his idea. This is an idea that he heard from an AI session with his friend Ryan Levesque and Samuel Wood. So shout out to those two gentlemen. I don't know who they are. I don't know if Ron, if you know who they are.
I don't know,
but shout out to them because they're the ones who put this together. So just to give some credit, Paul did do the blog post, which I think is great, 10-80-10. But Ryan Levesque and Samuel Woods, thanks.
Right. Yeah. And look, I could quibble with the numbers, right? I mean,
yeah.
But still,
20, 60, 20, whatever.
Paul used to talk about in the boot camp. He used to talk about automate the 60, 70% of the work that can be automated. That's repeatable, predictable, but take that remaining 30% and humanize it. Meet with the customer, have those meetings, just like the doctor who spends, an hour and a half with you rather than just 5 minutes because, they're in a transactional model. That's what we're talking about. That's a huge component of the transformation economy is relationships.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if you want to finish up here with this, Ron, because we are up against our break. But I just want to when we come back, we're going to talk about what their top-notch MVT, money value of time inflation, out-of-home experiences requires. We'll talk about that after the break. But we want to remind you can get a hold of Ron or me by sending an email to asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. I almost said it, Ron. I almost said the other one, at thresholdnow.com. You can check us out at patreon.com/TSOE, where you can listen to the show commercial free, as well as get our bonus episodes, which we do after each week. One more a plea, if you can, please remind your friends to subscribe to the show on their podcast player of choice. We would love for you to be able to do that. Find that at thesoulofenterprise.com/TSOE/subscribe. You can find out all the different places where you can subscribe to the show. But right now, a word from our sponsors, including the great folks at Woodard. And we are back on the Soul of Enterprise. We are talking today about the experience dividend, why money is time. And just to flesh out the rest of this article on the White Hutchinson website, and our thanks to them for writing a great piece, they have some suggestions for joining these organizations that are doing great out-of-home experiences. And here's their 3 thoughts. 1, make the experience authentic and distinct from what competitors offer, making it irreplaceable and justifying a premium price. Design every aspect of the customer journey to maximize engagement, enjoyment, emotional resonance, enduring. Attendees may feel their time is exceptionally well spent. And then lastly, consistently innovating, updating, refreshing, offering investment in quality service and unique features to enhance the overall experience with differentiation and increase its perceived value for time well spent. Ron, sounds an awful lot like plussing.
I know. I love this list. And, you have to hand it to these entertainment outfits that provide these experiences like the Sphere, like Cosm, like Disney World. They're constantly plussing those offerings. Mm-hmm. They have to. Mm-hmm. What's going to bring you back? It'll be interesting to see if you go back to Cosm, if they've done anything different.
Well, I'm looking for waiting for them to come out with a subscription, right? That's would they sell a season ticket, if you will, right, to one of the seats in the stadium?
Yeah. No, that would be cool. And Ed, we talk about this too, but everybody talks about differentiation and being different and getting away from commodity, but they're talking around the edges because they're not doing anything about their economic offering. Mm-hmm. What to me is so exciting about the transformation economy is this is a completely different offering.
Yes.
It's on and man, it is totally different from what everybody else is talking about. They're talking about productized services and, or hours or, which option do you want, good, better, best? And we're talking about transformations. It's completely different.
Completely different. Gotta be. Keeps us young, Ron. Keeps us young.
Absolutely. So then there was another really interesting article that Joe Pine referred to, and this is called Immersive Experiences Are Reshaping B2B Events, and it's about time. This was by Jane Haig from May 14, 2025, but they point out that the most powerful experiences follow 3 stages: anticipation, participation, and reflection. So building excitement before, engaging deeply during, and continuing the conversation as attendees walk out of a session and engage on social media. This applies to so many things. I think about, a family going to Disneyland or Disney World, right? The anticipation is palpable. Certainly when they're engaged when they're there. And then what are they talking about on the ride home or, and for months, years thereafter. And I think these experience companies have done a really good job with that because they pay attention to what people are saying as they leave. I remember this was part of the stuff I learned at Disney University. They called it mouse ears. They have many different listening points. And this was back in 97. So we're talking pre-internet and your phone, tracking you everywhere, right? They must be able to figure this out a lot easier now than they used to. But they used to ask people, just randomly go up to them in the park and say, hey, what did you like about the day? And they would have all these different mouse ears that would gather feedback about the guest's experience. And, they use that to refine and plus the offering.
Fantastic stuff.
I love this too, Ed, and I don't know where this comes from, but this is a great, great line. Whether it's discovering a passion for driving, wellness, sustainability, or adventure, brands today aim to change the consumer's identity, not just their possessions. In the new era, consumers do not just buy a product. They experience a journey and they become a new version of themselves.
Where is that from?
I don't know. It's some article. It was talking about different brands, but I just like that line, and I love the line. One of the pricing guys said this. if it's not expensive, it's not a transformation. That's really interesting, because there, this kind of highlights Pine's whole philosophy of this is the top of the progression of economic value transformations, therefore premium pricing.
Right.
And one of the points, and he does say you can productize an experience, and he does say you can even productize a transformation, but they're a lesser version of the real things, right? He talks about how some Michelin star restaurants will send you a kit, and they might have the meal pre-cooked. They might even have candles, and tell you the music to play. But it's not like being at the restaurant.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
But what he points out that most of these people that are, proposing that we productize services, what they never tell you is, but that comes with commoditized pricing. It's
Right.
got to be a lower price.
Got to be a lower price.
It's not the real thing. Similar.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, this has been something that in the space that I started out, the accounting, ERP, enterprise resource planning space, that we've been talking about standardizing the implementation for years. I mean, this goes back 15 years. We say, well, we're going to give you this standard plain vanilla implementation. We can put a fixed price on that, because but what nobody said was, oh, by the way, no one is going to like that at all. Like no, like everyone is going to hate it. Right. So yes, you can do it, but either the price has got to be lower, or it's going to be so crappy, such a crappy version that people are going to hate it anyway. And there's not a single one that I ever heard. Oh yeah, no, we had great success, and we stamped out one after the next these standardized implementations, one after the next. No, nobody was successful doing that. Nobody.
Right. That's a good point. Last article, Ed, and this just caught my eye because it was so well stated. Time Well Spent by Patricia Cullen from May 8th, 2025. And she's talking about London. And she says, London and its million of visitors have known instinctively all along that it's the city's culture, events, theater, music, food, sports, and nightlife that not only shape its identity but drive its prosperity. London's most powerful export is no longer just finance or fashion, it's feeling. And when you think about, major tourist attraction cities, like London and New York, and there is a cultural capital invested in those places. And she says, look, this is an anti-capitalist. It's what Wallman calls, I don't know who Wallman is, calls consumerism 2.0, spending driven by meaning and emotion rather than accumulation. People derive more lasting happiness from experiences than material goods. Why? Because experiences create memory. They foster connection, not clutter.
Yeah.
I really like that. So this idea that cities can be a place where you can have time well spent as well. That's But the politicians will ruin it because we'll have government-run grocery stores.
Come on, Ron. All right. Yeah.
I can't wait until he does government-run Broadway.
Okay. Excellent. Look forward to that. Not really. All right, well, we'll take it next week off, but we'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode of The Soul of Enterprise. We thank you so much for listening today. I guess I'll see you in 167 hours. Well, plus 168. So whatever that calculation is.
All right. This has been The Soul of Enterprise, Business and the Transformation Economy. Sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. Join us in 2 weeks, folks, on Friday at noon Pacific time. In the meantime, check us out at thesoulofenterprise.com. We'll have full show notes from today's episode, including links to the articles. You can also contact me or Ed at asktsoe@thresholdnow.com.